it's Neil here. You got me again. It's part 2. I'm not going to let you go until you get full understanding of what it's like to transfer into financial terms what is happening in the organization in terms of the quality, the processes involved. When you transfer this into financial terms, like a cost of quality report, like an alternative quality initiative report, you can get the attention of the top management to pay for the initiatives, to allocate the resources, to focus the company's efforts on making sure that there is quality improvements, and in the long term that there's sustainable business operations are going in the right direction. So let's get into the good stuff. We want 2 main objectives you want to cover here. First is I want to introduce you to the different measures that are involved. Of course, we don't have time to explain how they are derived. And then number 2, I want to show you an example that's all about putting together a report of 2 different cost of quality initiatives. That is, initiatives that if resources are given to your department as a quality control, that you can decide to either do A or B. So you're making the decision to choose the one that has the most benefits in the future for your division, for the organization. What is important here is to transfer a particular initiative into financial terms. And so again, this is a second level of evidence or justification that you can use to get the resources from senior management. So before we get into that example, let's go over some basic measures that are relevant in the balanced scorecard, because to date we've only focused on the financial measures. So the learning objective 2 or learning outcome 2 is to understand what are some good examples of measures at the customer level, the internal process level, and the learning and growth level. So here we have the customer perspective. We've got surveys on satisfaction. You can do surveys. You can do mystery shoppers. We can have focus groups, market share, the number of defective units shipped to customers if it's a B2B. Okay, you don't want B2C as defective units, right? A number of customer complaints. Obviously, this is going to happen more with B2C because you're serving a greater number of customers. Product fail rates, delivery delays, on-time deliveries. Again, some measures are relating to quality. What is the percentage of good quality out of the total units shipped? And on-time deliveries, this is to do with on-time performance. One is quality performance, one is on-time performance. Remember, most organizations are either competing on quality or competing on time. That's how you beat your competition. You don't want to just compete on price, because that's a lose-lose game over time. If you keep on putting your price down, you're eating away your own margins. Of course, there are other strategies behind competing on price, but we're focusing on measures here. Let's have a look at the internal business perspective measures. Yes, and so we've got control charts, Pareto diagrams, and cause-effect diagrams. These are management frameworks or mechanisms, and each of them pulls apart a particular problem in different ways. Control charts enables you to see the extremes of variances in activity over time. And so with production line A, this is in control, so we can do a tick here. Production B is out of control. You can see it's gone beyond the tolerances if we've had set this as our tolerance 2 sigma. Production line C has not gone beyond a particular tolerance, so this is in control. And so what is important here is to look at control charts, and that gives you some idea about what is normal, what is abnormal, and so then you can focus on the abnormal and not just look at any little variance that happens from day to day. What about another approach to understanding and measuring internal business processes. Let's go to the second idea. Use an example of Photon's copier problem. And Photon Copier, they manufacture photocopier machines. This is a Pareto diagram, and this is all about the 20-80 rule, or the 80-20 rule. That is, focus on the 20% of factors that is causing 80% of your problems. You've heard that in sales, focus on the 20% of customers that are giving you 80% of revenue. It is the same idea. And so the 20% may be down here, and that is copies are fuzzy and unclear. This is the number one problem you may want to focus on and attend to or devote resources to, rather than focusing on problems down here as a reason for the defect, because this is going to give you more bang for the buck when you correct this problem, assuming you have limited resources and cannot correct all of the problems at once. So that is one approach to trying to solve Photon's copier problem. A third approach to solving Photon's copier problem is to use a cause-effect diagram. This is not an 80-20 rule, but is basically laying out what are all the potential influences on the defects that Photon is experiencing. And we put a big D here for defect. Yes, not defense, it's defect. So it could be due to methods and design factors, human factors, machine related factors, or materials and components factors. Now remember, these are just guidance groups of factors only. Of course, you could add in two more that may relate to different other factors. For example, maybe the environment, and we put that in there, or maybe regulatory could be in there. So it's not like you stop at 4, but you just have some groups to help organize your thinking. And then we may be able to apply a Pareto principle across these different groups of factors to find out, okay, which of these factors might rank number 1 or number 2, number 3, number 4 in terms of causing the most problems with the defects. And so just summarizing this again, we've got all these different types of factors that could lead to any of the defects that have been laid out in the Pareto diagram in the previous slide. So let's go to the non-financial measures for the internal business perspective. It could be the percentage of defective products, the average repair time. There's that time again, all right? You know, it's quality and time. The percentage of reworked products, the number of different types of defects found, and the number of design and process changes. These are all different ways of measuring what is going on the factory floor. It's not like you measure everything, but my advice to most of my clients is at least start measuring something that you have not measured before that may be related to a particular process in your organization that you want to get more visibility on. Don't just go and say, okay, I want to know more about this process, and then you throw suddenly 5 or 6 measures onto that process. Number one, you're going to be spending more time on measuring, and you may not spend the right amount of time on making sure the process is done properly. Number two, once you get all that data, what are you going to do with it? Which measure is most important? So my advice is start with one measure, at the most 2 new measures at a time. Get comfortable with it. Develop a standard for that measure. And then that data that is collected by that measure becomes more meaningful. You're able to focus on it because there's not so much data there. Okay, and when you get, then you can make a decision, is it important, is it not, and you may try another measure. So there we have the internal business perspective, non-financial measures. What about the learning and growth perspective? I love training in this area because we focus on the employee value proposition, and that's all about how do you attract employees to come and work for your company, but not only physically come to the company, but physically but mentally devote themselves in terms of discretionary focus on the tasks that they are assigned to do under their job contract. Here are some questions, measures that may help to give you feedback on how the employees are being engaged in your organization. The employee turnover ratio, how often are employees coming and leaving? Okay, what's the average time for your employees? Is it less than 12 months? Is it less than 6 months? You might have a problem. Employee empowerment, this gets back to employee value propositions, part of the culture you want to develop. You want to get their discretionary behavior on top of their physical presence in the organization. Employee satisfaction, very important. Customers will notice this too. Employee training, these are all aspects of employee development. These are all aspects of the culture that you may want to develop to attract employees to your organization in the first place. So there we have it. We've gone over some of the measures that could be representative at the customer perspective, the internal process perspective, and the learning and growth perspective. On top of that, we did cover 3 different types of management models that could be used to help us investigate the internal business process perspective. The Pareto charts, the control charts, and the fishbone diagram. Yes. Let's go on to the next section. We want to, in this section, paint the picture like Photon has a copy of problem. There are defects, and we've decided through the Pareto diagram that there is one defect that is occupying most of the defects that are found. One type of defect, yes. Here there are 2 solutions proposed, like 2 quality initiatives proposed, you remember? So early in part 1, we looked at putting together a cost of quality report so we can say, go to manager, Mr. CEO, Mr. Quality Manager, Mr. Regional Manager, we need resources for this initiative so we can cut down our total costs of quality as a percentage of sales. Okay, then the CEO has said, yes, Mr. Quality Manager, or you're in charge of production manager, here is the money for your quality initiative. I'm prepared to give you an extra $250,000. But before we do that, I want you to show me some solutions you have in mind. You have given me some basic aggregate numbers of putting extra money into prevention, into appraisal activities in your organization. But I want some more specific report of how that money will be spent. And you're thinking, okay, so you're the quality manager. You need to go back to the drawing board now and come up with some financial report that justifies maybe 2 alternatives. So you can go back to your senior manager and say, this is what I've come up with. Here are 2 alternatives, and alternative A or B is my preferred option. And this is why, because here are the numbers that suggest and support this preferred option. So this is what we're going to do in this section. Again, the financials are being used to justify the investment of resources in a particular quality initiative. And that's what we mean by learning objective 3. We're using cost of quality measures to make decisions. We're trying to identify relevant incremental costs and benefits and opportunity costs to evaluate the trade-offs. So in Photon's copy a problem, there were 2 solutions proposed. We could, number 1, electronically inspect and test the frames before production starts. And that's kind of like appraisal costs. You're appraising, you're doing things early on. Or we could redesign and strengthen the frames and their shipping containers to withstand mishandling during transportation. So that's sort of later in the process, but they are two different options. If you do one, you not necessarily have to do the other. They're kind of optional. So let's have a look at the different costs associated with these two solutions. Again, we're trying to justify whether we go with one solution or another, not only to convince yourself if you're in charge of quality, but also to justify the investment made to senior management. So here we have option A, that is further inspecting incoming frames, and option B, we want to redesign frames. So let me go over what each involves. If we're going to further inspect incoming frames, that's like materials that are coming in, then that's going to incur additional inspection and testing costs. Okay, either by your own people or bringing in a third-party auditor. What is the cost? It's going to cost you $400,000. Yes. So what are the benefits of that? Well, it may get... Before we go through the numbers in terms of the benefits, what we're doing, again, in part 1, we looked at 1, 2, 3, 4. We had prevention, we had appraisal, and then we had internal failure, we had external failure. These are all the different types of groups of costs, quality control costs. And so what we're proposing with A and B is in the area of 1 and 2, where you have direct control over the cost of quality initiatives. And the idea is if you spend dollars here, all right, you spend dollars here, that is $400,000 for option A, or $560,000, that's $300,000 plus 160 for option B. If you spend that amount here, you're going to get benefits down in terms of savings, in terms of less internal failure, in terms of less external failure. So let's just have a look at some of these Group 3 and Group 4 costs that we are saving, and they are the benefits that we are looking for with these initiatives. So for option A, we are having savings of rework costs of $960,000, but with option B, now we have $1.28 million in saving. Let's go for option A again. We have savings in customer support costs. We are saving $40,000. For option B, we're saving $56,000. Basically, it is the amount per hour multiplied by the hours that we are saving. Customers are no longer complaining or needing extra support. Why? Because there's less defects with the copiers. There are savings in transportation costs for repairs of parts. You no longer have to transport parts to where the photocopiers are for repair on site, where the customers have purchased their photocopier and located their photocopier. So here we're saving $90,000, and here we're saving $126,000. We're saving in warranty repair costs, and these are claims that customers put through that you have to pay for because they're in the warranty period. You have made a guarantee for 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. Again, $900,000 and $1.26 million you're saving here. So the total contribution margin from the additional sales is basically the $1.5 million here and $1.8 million here. What does that mean? You're getting $6,000 per copier and 250 copies you're able to sell more. Here you're able to sell 300 more copiers if you have redesigned frames. In other words, because you have less repair parts, you have less repair problems, you have less warranty problems, guess what is happening? Customers are putting good word of mouth around, and other potential customers are buying your product that they didn't buy before? Or in opposite terms, because there are so many problems, maybe there's negative words that are going around and other customers are not buying, they are buying your competitors' products. So this is where that $1.5 million come from, and the $1.8 million, these are extra sales you're able to achieve. You have better reputation for quality, you have better social media reputation also. So the net savings, additional contribution margin under A is 3.09 million and under B is 3.862 million. So the difference in favor of B is 772,000. So in the end, you can go back to the manager, the CEO, or your direct report and say, look, you're giving me this money. I have looked at two options, A and B. I've chosen B because I believe that these are the savings I think we can achieve with going with option B. And here's my justification. Do you approve? Do you not approve? And the manager say, well, I trust your judgment because you are the quality control manager. And so there you have it. What we're doing here is we're using this financial report not to choose where we improve the quality in the organization, but we're using the financial report to justify, we're using it to get the attention of senior management again, to justify that option B is better than option A. And it makes you look good because you have used quantitative means to support your gut feel. Maybe you've been in quality management for many years. You don't need numbers to tell you what you think is the best course of action. And you think most managers think this way. But when you want to convince your next report or the report after, then you need these financial numbers because that is what communicates to your next report or the report after. You don't necessarily have to convince yourself in all situations. So keep this in mind. Again, in this part 2, we're looking at the financial report first and foremost to just justify a decision, and perhaps not justify a decision by the experienced person on the ground, but to justify it to the next report, the direct report or the C managers. Make them feel better that you know what you're talking about. So here's our summary. We have estimated incremental costs. We have cost savings from less rework, customer support and repairs. And we have increased contribution margin from higher sales as a result of building a reputation for quality and performance. Just to summarize these two options again, and this is probably how you would present it to the CEO in terms of these 3 conversational points. So let's do a final summary here of what we're doing. In evaluating strategy, we have financial measures. We want to report to the CEO, the CFO, and the CIO. We just want to get their attention. Why? Because we want them to give us resources. What we did in part 2 is say, okay, we need to go one step further. We have A, one type of option, and B, we have another type of option. We have option A, we have option B. Let's just draw that there, all right? And so now we can use that to further either justify if they ask more questions, or to justify why you have chosen one path or another path during the implementation or even after the implementation. So you can come back and say, we went for option B, here are our forecasts, and then in 12 months time you can go back and say, well, here are our savings compared to our forecasts. Don't I look good as a quality manager? I deserve a raise. You can see that. You can either use that as part of the initial justification, or it can become a benchmark against which to compare against future performance. Again, this whole circle is all about the accounting numbers enable you to communicate to senior management. Of course, when it comes to implementing A or B, you may need to work with non-financial measures. You may need to work with control charts. You may need to work with Pareto diagrams, or you may need to work with fishbone diagrams to really get to the bottom of where these defects are coming from and how the initiative is going to work operationally on the factory floor. And that's where your expertise comes in. That's not necessarily where the C manager has expertise, and they're not interested in all those little details. So there you have it, part 1 and part 2. Part 2 in this section. I hope you have a better understanding of how using accounting to report for quality focuses managers' attention and actually facilitates more accurate decision making in the organization. Catch you in the classroom, and thank you for listening. Bye for now.